"I can't believe this is happening," Logan Carter whispered under his breath as he held the small, crumpled photo in his hands, the edges worn and slightly bent from being passed between files and folders in the hospital's office, his steel-gray eyes narrowing as he stared at the tiny, delicate face staring back at him, a face that could only belong to someone he once loved and lost. The date scribbled at the corner sending an electric jolt through his chest that made his hands tremble. Involuntarily, the fluorescent lights above cast a harsh glare on the polished linoleum floor, bouncing off the chrome handles of the filing cabinets and the sterile white walls, emphasizing the contrast between the calm exterior of the hospital environment and the storm raging inside him, Logan's mind racing back 3 long years to the final bitter months of his marriage to Hannah Cooper, the late nights spent in silent offices, the cold farewell at the lawyer's desk, the empty apartment where echoes of laughter once lived, all memories now twisting into a knot of guilt, disbelief, and the raw, unfiltered shock of realizing that this tiny human being might be his own child, a truth he had never been prepared to confront. He could feel the pulse in his neck thrum like a drumbeat, a rhythm that matched the rapid pacing of his thoughts as he traced the soft outline of the baby's tiny hand in the photograph with a finger that felt both numb and alive, the photograph shaking slightly between his palms, Logan biting back a sharp inhale as his brain calculated timelines, the proximity of the date to the final separation, the faint resemblance in the shape of the eyes and nose, and the soft curve of the lips, all converging to an undeniable reality that forced him to swallow hard against the sudden lump in his throat, the air in the small office feeling thick, almost tangible, as if the walls themselves were closing in around him, and yet he could not tear his gaze away, the picture holding him captive with the weight of 1,000 unspoken questions, each one punctuated by the almost imperceptible quiver of his fingers, a silent testament to the storm of emotions he could not yet articulate, the quiet buzz of the fluorescent lights above filling the oppressive silence as he finally dared to let a shiver run down his spine, the room suddenly feeling too small, too bright, too real, and in that moment, Logan knew that nothing in the world would ever feel normal again because the delicate truth held in his hands threatened to unravel the carefully constructed life he had rebuilt since the divorce. The delicate vulnerability of a baby's face igniting a surge of protective instinct and fear, a simultaneous ache of longing and regret, and the sudden, overwhelming need to find Hannah, to see her, to hear her voice and understand how this moment had come to be, his car keys resting on the counter like a lifeline, the engine in his sleek black sedan waiting to carry him into a past he thought he had left behind, every fiber of his being taut with anticipation and dread. As he finally stepped away from the office, cradling the photograph like a fragile promise, the city streets stretching out before him, the sunlight reflecting off glass towers in the distance, each step a reminder that time had not erased love, mistakes, or secrets, and that today, the world would force him to confront a truth he had tried to bury, a truth that was waiting patiently, unforgivingly, in the hands of Hannah Cooper, a truth that could change everything in an instant. Logan Carter's car moved swiftly through the bustling streets of New York, the cityscape blurring past the windows as he gripped the steering wheel with a tension that made his knuckles white, every red light feeling like an eternity, the photograph of the small child pressed against his chest as if holding it closer could somehow offer him guidance through the storm of emotions consuming him, his mind racing back to moments he had long tried to bury, the quiet evenings when he had thought he was doing the right thing by walking away, the silent apartment that had once been filled with laughter and warmth, and the painful certainty that perhaps he had been wrong, the thought alone causing a rush of regret that clawed at his chest, his heart pounding with a rhythm that seemed to echo the faint cries of memory he had thought were lost to time, and yet there was no turning back because with each passing block he drew closer to the truth he had been avoiding, a truth that demanded confrontation, understanding, and reckoning. Logan recalled the last words he had exchanged with Hannah Cooper, the sharp finality in her voice as she had insisted they needed separate lives, the precise way she had packed her belongings with methodical efficiency, and the image of her small frame standing in the doorway, holding back tears she would not allow herself to shed, haunted him now more vividly than ever, the city lights reflecting off the sleek black interior of the sedan and dancing across his face as if illuminating the very questions that would consume the next hours. What had she known? When had she known? And how had she managed to protect this fragile secret all this time without revealing it? Logan's chest tightened as he considered the enormity of the responsibility that now rested In his hands, the delicate balance between acknowledging the past and stepping carefully into the present, the photograph a silent reminder of the innocence that depended on him, the weight of potential consequences pressing upon him with a gravity that was nearly tangible, the traffic around him a soft murmur compared to the storm in his mind, and the faint scent of his cologne mingling with the cool breeze flowing through the open window, grounding him just enough to keep the vehicle moving. As he rehearsed the words he would speak, the tone he would choose, and the questions he dared to ask, each scenario playing out with precision and care, the memory of Hannah's laughter in the sunlit kitchen 3 years ago mixing with the image of the child in the photograph, a combination that brought both a sting and a surge of protective instinct, his thoughts interrupted only by the distant honk of impatient drivers. Yet he welcomed the sound, a reminder that the world outside was still turning, and that he had a path to follow that would lead him directly into the heart of the moment he had been dreading. Logan's pulse a steady drumbeat of anticipation and anxiety, each breath measured and deliberate as he finally reached the familiar address, the brick facade of Hannah's apartment building coming into view, the small garden at the front door bathed in the golden afternoon light, the soft hum of city life around him grounding the intensity of his internal storm. He parked, taking a moment to center himself, smoothing his suit jacket, checking the photograph one last time, ensuring it was intact and ready to reveal every detail, memorized and ready to become part of the conversation that would alter everything. And then stepping out of the car, the photograph held firmly, the spring in the steps that led to the front door tempered by the weight of what was to come, each footfall a deliberate measure toward the confrontation and connection that awaited. Logan felt the complex mixture of fear, hope, and resolve intertwining, preparing him to enter a space where the past and present would collide, and the future, uncertain and fragile, would begin to unfold. Logan Carter's hand hovered over the buzzer, hesitating for a fraction of a second as he tried to steady his breathing, the photograph still clutched tightly in his other hand, the edges soft from the repeated gripping and shifting, his mind running through every possibility, every question that he would need to ask, every emotion he might have to contain or reveal. The cool metal of the intercom button pressing into his palm a reminder of the reality he could no longer avoid, the soft hum of the apartment building around him a stark contrast to the rapid pounding of his heart, and when the door finally clicked open, he stepped inside, the familiar scent of the hallway immediately bringing memories of past conversations, shared meals, and quiet laughter, each one now tinged with the ache of absence, the apartment itself unchanged, the small doormat still in place, the faint marks of wear on the carpet, all familiar markers of a life that once had been intertwined with his own, and he could feel the tension building, his chest tightening as he approached the door to Hannah Cooper's apartment, each step deliberate, measured, his eyes scanning for any indication that she might be aware of his presence, his ears attuned to every sound, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the soft murmur of a television, the faint laughter of a child somewhere within the walls, and as he lifted his hand to knock, his mind raced with memories of her voice, the sound of it crisp and certain during their separation, the warmth that had once accompanied her every word, now mingled with an edge of sadness he could not ignore. And when the door finally opened to reveal Hannah standing there, her eyes widening slightly in surprise, Logan felt a wave of recognition and longing crash over him, her posture cautious but composed, the small child in her arms now evident, the baby's features catching the afternoon light, soft curls, wide eyes, a fragile hand reaching toward him almost instinctively, and in that instant, Logan's chest constricted, his hands still trembling from the photograph as he struggled to find the words. Any words that could bridge the gap of years, the silence stretching between them heavy with unspoken history and anticipation, and then Hannah spoke, her tone measured, quiet but firm, each word weighted with years of experience and protective instinct. "Logan, I did not expect to see you here," and he nodded, swallowing hard against the lump in his throat, his eyes tracing the curve of her cheek, the delicate line of her jaw, the small child now shifting slightly, making a soft cooing sound that seemed to punctuate the stillness, Logan's mind snapping back to the photograph, the reality solidifying in a way that made every second stretch, his voice barely above a whisper as he said, "Hannah, I need to ask you about this," lifting the photograph slightly so that the small image was visible, her eyes flicking down to it, the color draining slightly from her face, a mixture of recognition, fear, and something softer, something hesitant, as the child shifted again. Logan reaching instinctively to steady the baby's hand without touching too much, careful not to overstep, the quiet hum of the apartment filling the spaces between their words, each pause deliberate, charged with tension, the air thick with history and uncertainty, and he finally added, his tone steadying, measured, "I need to know when," and Hannah's lips pressed together, the tiny sigh escaping her as she glanced down at the child, Logan catching the subtle tightening of her hands on the baby's blanket, the weight of the truth hanging between them, the apartment suddenly feeling smaller, more intimate, every detail magnified. The soft sunlight reflecting off the walls casting long shadows that seemed to underscore the gravity of the moment, and as she finally looked up at him, Logan saw the flicker of vulnerability, the hint of trust, and the tremor in his own hands mirrored in the quiet realization that whatever came next, the life of this child, the bond they had once shared, and the future that waited outside that door depended on the delicate balance of honesty, courage, and the careful words that would follow. Logan Carter took a slow, measured step into the apartment, his eyes scanning the familiar space with a mixture of caution and resolve, the soft afternoon light filtering through the partially drawn blinds casting long, warm streaks across the floor, illuminating small touches of Hannah Cooper's life that had remained unchanged, the carefully arranged furniture, the framed photographs on the shelves, the faint scent of vanilla and fresh laundry, all grounding him even as his chest tightened. With the weight of the moment, the baby nestled safely in Hannah's arms, shifting slightly and letting out a soft, contented coo that tugged at his heartstrings and reminded him of the innocence and trust that existed despite years of separation and uncertainty. He could feel the pulse in his veins, a rhythm matching the quiet hum of the air conditioner and the distant sounds of the city beyond the window. Every detail sharpened in his awareness as he approached Hannah cautiously, keeping his voice steady yet gentle. "I do not want to overwhelm you," he said quietly, allowing the words to float between them, carrying both respect and urgency, his gaze lingering on the photograph again, the small, delicate features of the child reminding him of the responsibility now tied to his presence, and as he stepped closer, Hannah's eyes flicked up to meet his, her expression a complex mixture of apprehension, guarded hope, and the subtle warmth that had once drawn him to her. Logan extended his hand slightly, not to take the child but as a gesture of connection, a silent offering of collaboration and understanding, his mind racing with the questions he needed answered, the timelines he needed to verify, and the emotions he needed to acknowledge, and yet he held himself back, mindful of the fragile balance between intrusion and support, the soft padding of his shoes against the carpet the only sound that accompanied the quiet tension, each second stretching with the anticipation of revelation and response, and as Hannah shifted the baby slightly in her arms, her gaze unwavering but her lips pressing together, Logan felt the subtle tremor in her hands and knew that beneath her calm exterior, the protective instincts and long-held secrets were engaged, her careful silence inviting him to tread carefully, to ask, to listen, and to understand. He allowed a brief pause, the weight of unspoken history filling the space, his own hand still slightly trembling from the earlier shock and realization, the photograph held loosely in one hand as a reminder of what had brought him here, and he spoke again. "I need to understand everything, Hannah, from the day we separated to today, the moments that shaped this life," his words deliberate, filled with a mixture of reverence and urgency, the soft light catching the tension in his jaw and the flicker of emotion in his eyes, the city beyond the window continuing its steady rhythm unaware of the intimate reckoning taking place, and as Hannah's lips parted slightly, her gaze steady but thoughtful, Logan felt the first real stirrings of dialogue, the beginning of answers that would unravel years of mystery, regret, and hope, every subtle shift in posture, every micro-expression, registering with him as a complex symphony of emotion, the air thick with anticipation, the fragile balance of past and present, and the realization that in the next moments, decisions and truths would be laid bare that could alter not just their own lives but the life of the small child who depended on the careful unfolding of this encounter. Logan Carter took a deliberate step closer, careful not to startle Hannah Cooper or the small child cradled in her arms, the soft weight of the photograph still resting against his chest like a tangible reminder of the truth he was now confronting. His eyes meeting hers with a mixture of urgency and patience, the afternoon sunlight slanting through the window and catching the subtle highlights in her hair, the room quiet except for the gentle cooing of the baby and the faint hum of the city outside, each sound emphasizing the delicate nature of this encounter, Logan's mind racing through the timelines, the dates, the possibilities, and yet he kept his voice calm and measured. "Hannah, I need to know the exact day, the details that I might have missed," his words chosen with care to balance respect with the pressing need for clarity. Hannah's fingers shifted slightly, smoothing the baby's blanket, the small motion betraying the tension she had been holding in, and she let out a soft breath, the quiet acknowledgement of years of protection and secrecy weighing on her as she met his gaze steadily. Logan's pulse quickened with anticipation and apprehension, the memories of their shared past flooding him with both warmth and regret, the hallway outside the apartment seeming to fade into insignificance as the intensity of the moment centered entirely on the exchange of truth about the child. Every subtle detail registering with him, the slight curve of the baby's lips, the tiny hands gripping the blanket, the careful posture of Hannah that spoke volumes without a single word. Logan taking another step closer, mindful of personal space, the photograph now held loosely in one hand, a bridge between past and present, and he continued, his voice softer now, almost gentle, I do not want to accuse or question unnecessarily, I only need to understand how we arrived here, how the timing aligns. The careful phrasing intended to convey trust and to encourage honesty. While still containing the urgency that had driven him across the city, Hannah's eyes flickered to the photograph and then back to his, the silent acknowledgement passing between them. Like a fragile thread, her lips parting slightly as she prepared to speak, the baby shifting again, small soft sounds escaping, Logan noticing every micro-expression, every nuanced gesture, interpreting them with the precision that had served him well in business but now challenged him in the most personal of ways, the weight of years and decisions pressing down, yet balanced by the undeniable bond that the photograph had revealed. And as Hannah began to recount the day, the moments of separation, the careful concealment of pregnancy, and the steps she had taken to protect both herself and the child, Logan felt a mixture of relief and renewed responsibility, the room seeming to hold its breath with them, each word she spoke carrying both explanation and emotion, every detail providing pieces to the puzzle of his understanding, and he listened intently, nodding slowly, allowing the space for her truth to settle between them. The baby nestled peacefully, unaware yet central to the gravity of the moment, and as the story unfolded, Logan's hands continued to tremble slightly, not from fear but from the overwhelming realization of the depth of the life he had yet to fully reclaim and the delicate balance of trust and care that would define the next steps in this unexpected reunion. Logan Carter stood silently for a moment, the weight of the truth pressing heavily against his chest as he watched Hannah Cooper cradle the baby, the room around them alive with the quiet rhythm of ordinary life yet saturated with the extraordinary tension of revelation, his hands still trembling slightly as he took a careful step forward, allowing his gaze to sweep over the small apartment, the familiar but now charged details, the worn rug, the framed photographs on the wall, the soft light filtering through the blinds, each one grounding him even as the surge of emotion threatened to overwhelm. And then he spoke, his voice calm but carrying the gravity of urgency, Hannah, I need to understand how we move forward from here, the simple words loaded with years of missed time, regret, and the new, fragile responsibility that had been thrust upon him. Hannah shifted slightly, adjusting the baby in her arms, the child letting out a soft sigh, tiny fingers curling around the edge of her blanket, and she met his eyes steadily, the careful composure she maintained betraying just a hint of the protective instinct and the weight of secrecy she had carried alone. Logan felt the pull of both past and present, the memories of shared laughter, quiet conversations, and the final, painful months of separation colliding with the present reality, the sound of the city outside the window a distant hum compared to the intensity within the room, his mind racing through possibilities, questions, and the steps that must follow, yet he allowed himself to simply stand there for a moment, absorbing the sight of the child, the small life that represented both consequence and hope, and then he took a measured breath, extending his hand gently toward Hannah, not to take the baby, but as a gesture of connection and reassurance, a bridge between the years they had spent apart and the delicate trust that needed to be rebuilt. The baby shifting slightly in response to the motion, eyes bright and alert, and Logan felt a surge of protective instinct that mingled with awe, the photograph in his pocket a silent testament to the discovery that had brought him here, the edges worn from repeated handling, a reminder of the fragility and importance of the moment. He continued softly, I want to be here, Hannah, in whatever way is needed, for both of you, each word deliberate, carefully chosen to convey sincerity and commitment without overstepping. Hannah's lips pressed together, a subtle tension in her shoulders as she processed the offer, the child shifting again, tiny sounds filling the room with the innocence and vitality of life that had been missing from Logan's calculations and memories, and he observed her closely, noticing the slight hesitation in her movements, the cautious softness in her gaze, and the protective posture that she maintained, all of which conveyed both the depth of her love and the complexity of trust that had to be navigated. Logan's pulse thrummed with a mix of anticipation, respect, and an emerging sense of purpose. Every detail of the room, every micro-expression, every infinitesimal gesture of the child and Hannah registering with him as he measured his words and actions carefully, the soft afternoon light painting long shadows across the floor, amplifying the intimacy and weight of the encounter. And as the conversation began to unfold, Logan listened intently, absorbing every word, every pause, and every nuance. The room holding the quiet tension of lives poised on the cusp of change, the delicate balance between past mistakes and the possibility of future connection, the small child nestled safely in Hannah's arms serving as both catalyst and anchor, the subtle shifts in posture, the almost imperceptible signs of emotion, all guiding Logan toward the careful steps he would take next, ensuring that the revelation, the understanding, and the potential for renewed trust would be handled with care, attention, and unwavering focus, knowing that this moment, fragile and fleeting, held the key to a new chapter for all three of them. Logan Carter's hands shook slightly as he reached out toward the small child, the photograph he had carried moments ago now safely tucked into his suit pocket, a tangible reminder of the revelation that had brought him here. And as he knelt carefully to meet the baby's gaze, the soft coos and tiny movements drew an involuntary smile across his face, the city beyond the window humming quietly, oblivious to the significance of the moment unfolding within the apartment, his eyes flicking to Hannah Cooper, noticing the subtle tension in her shoulders and the cautious but steady way she held the child, and he spoke softly, deliberately, "I promise to be here, to support both of you in any way you need," each word infused with sincerity and measured calm, his voice carrying the weight of both authority and compassion, the baby reaching instinctively toward him, tiny fingers curling around the air between them, prompting Logan to extend a gentle hand, mindful of the delicate nature of the interaction. And as Hannah adjusted the blanket around the child, she exhaled slowly, her eyes meeting his with a complex mixture of relief, caution, and the faintest hint of trust. The quiet of the apartment punctuated only by the soft cooing of the child and the distant hum of traffic, every detail amplified in Logan's awareness, the warmth of the afternoon sunlight casting long shadows across the floor, illuminating the lines of their faces and the delicate contours of the baby's features. Logan's mind raced through the possibilities of the coming days, the careful balance between being present and overstepping, understanding and respecting the boundaries Hannah had maintained, and yet the pull of responsibility and the instinctive protective urge toward the child compelled him forward, every movement deliberate, measured, ensuring that the tone of his actions conveyed reassurance rather than intrusion, the photograph in his pocket a silent anchor to the truth he now embraced. And as the child shifted slightly, turning toward him, the smallest smile appearing across tiny features, Logan felt a surge of emotion he had not anticipated, a mixture of awe, responsibility, and a deep, quiet longing to reconnect with a past that was no longer lost but intertwined with this fragile new reality. Hannah's lips parted as she spoke, her voice steady but carrying the weight of vulnerability. "You do realize this changes everything," and Logan nodded, absorbing the gravity of her words, recognizing the layers of history, trust, and care that would need to be rebuilt. The apartment a cocoon of shared history and new possibility, every item, every detail a witness to both what had been and what could now be. And as he gently lifted the child slightly to offer support without taking control, Logan felt the unspoken acknowledgement passing between them, the delicate negotiation of trust and presence, the rhythm of breaths, the soft coos, and the quiet understanding that this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where past regrets would meet present responsibilities, and where careful, measured steps forward could create a foundation of safety, care, and connection. For the three of them, the afternoon light now casting a gentle glow across the room, highlighting the promise and fragility of the moment, every subtle movement, glance, and gesture resonating with significance. And as Hannah adjusted her posture, allowing Logan the space to engage with the child, the atmosphere held the tension of possibility, hope, and the quiet yet powerful recognition that life had shifted irrevocably, and that from this instant onward, decisions, words, and actions would shape the shared future that was beginning to emerge before them. Hannah Cooper watched Logan Carter carefully, her eyes softening as she observed the genuine concern and tentative care in his posture, the small child in her arms shifting slightly and cooing in response to his presence, the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window highlighting the delicate features of both the baby and Logan's face, a mixture of relief, caution, and tentative hope settling over the room. Logan reached slowly toward the child again, careful to keep his movements deliberate and gentle, his voice soft as he spoke. "I will be here, Hannah, for both of you, however you need me to be," each word measured to convey sincerity and reassurance without imposing, and Hannah allowed a faint smile to touch her lips, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly as she observed the small gestures of commitment and care, the air between them filled with the subtle rhythm of breathing, the soft coos of the child, and the quiet understanding that a bridge was forming. One step at a time, across years of separation and uncertainty, Logan's hands remained steady as he observed the baby's small movements, the delicate curl of tiny fingers, the gentle shifting of the body against Hannah's chest, every detail registering with him, heightening the sense of responsibility and protective instinct that had surged the moment he saw the photograph, and as he spoke again, his tone soft but firm. "Tell me what I need to know, everything about these past years that I have missed." Hannah nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude, guarded trust, and the faintest glimmer of hope, the room feeling intimate and safe, every sound and gesture magnified in significance, the city outside fading into a quiet background hum as they centered on the moment before them, the weight of the past balanced delicately with the possibility of a shared future. Logan taking a cautious breath, allowing the words to settle and the silence to stretch, the soft warmth of sunlight touching the three of them as Hannah began recounting events with measured clarity, detailing the careful steps she had taken to protect the child, the adjustments she had made to maintain stability and safety, and the difficult choices that had guided each action. Logan listening intently, absorbing every nuance, every hesitation, every unspoken feeling conveyed in subtle shifts of expression and posture, the photograph safely tucked away but remaining a constant reminder of the revelation that had brought them together, and as the story unfolded, Logan felt a deep, quiet swell of emotion, a mixture of awe, responsibility, and gratitude for the trust Hannah was extending, each moment reinforcing the delicate balance between past mistakes, present care, and future possibilities, his pulse steadying as he realized that the foundation of trust, honesty, and care was being laid in this very room, the afternoon stretching softly around them, the city outside continuing its rhythmic hum, yet all that mattered was the fragile, luminous connection forming between them, the small child nestled securely in Hannah's arms, and the unspoken promise that together they could navigate what had been lost and what could now be rebuilt. The air rich with the tension and warmth of reconciliation, understanding, and the tentative hope of a new chapter beginning right in the quiet light of that apartment. Logan Carter felt a quiet intensity settle over the apartment as he sat across from Hannah Cooper, the small child nestled comfortably between them, the afternoon sunlight spilling softly across the room and illuminating the gentle movements of the baby's tiny hands and expressive eyes, Logan's mind replaying the timeline, the memories, and the unspoken questions that had led to this moment, each one threading together the past and present in a delicate tapestry of emotion and anticipation. He reached slowly for the photograph once more, not to examine it, but to reaffirm the reality of the connection it had revealed, his fingers brushing lightly over the edges as if tracing the path that had brought them here, and Hannah watched him with a mixture of apprehension and cautious hope, the soft rise and fall of the child's breathing creating a rhythm that grounded both of them in the present while the weight of past years lingered in the air. Logan's voice was low and steady, deliberate with care. "We cannot change the years that have passed, but we can decide how to move forward from this moment." Each word carrying both acknowledgement and intention, the small child shifting slightly, the soft cooing reinforcing the gravity and beauty of the responsibility now shared. Hannah nodded slowly, her eyes meeting his with an unspoken agreement, a recognition that while the future was uncertain, the foundation of trust and presence was being laid with patience, respect, and careful consideration. Logan adjusted his posture to bring himself closer without intruding, maintaining an awareness of space and sensitivity, observing every subtle movement, every micro-expression that conveyed thought, emotion, and the fragile negotiation of connection. He continued, softly, "I want to support you, to be present in a way that respects both of your needs, to learn, to understand, and to protect," the sincerity in his tone matched by the attentiveness of his gaze. The city outside fading into a quiet backdrop as the room held a concentrated stillness, a space where history, responsibility, and the tentative promise of new beginnings converged. Hannah's lips curved slightly in a soft smile, a mixture of relief and measured optimism, the child's small fingers curling instinctively around a blanket edge, and Logan allowed himself a brief exhale, the tension in his shoulders easing just enough to feel the subtle shift in the energy of the room, the soft light catching the contours of their faces, highlighting the nuanced expressions that conveyed more than words ever could. And as the dialogue continued, slow and deliberate, each phrase, pause, and glance building trust and understanding, Logan felt a deep, quiet affirmation that this moment, however delicate, held the potential for a shared path forward, a future carefully reconstructed with honesty, care, and presence, the atmosphere imbued with the gentle rhythm of breathing, the tiny sounds of life, and the unspoken promise that they could navigate the complexities of past choices while embracing the possibilities of the present. And as the afternoon stretched into early evening, the warmth of the sunlight softening, the room held the weight of history, the promise of protection, and the tender unfolding of connection, every small gesture, look, and breath resonating with the power of reconciliation, trust, and the potential for a family rebuilt on patience, care, and deliberate, heartfelt attention to the fragile, beautiful life they now shared.